getting tougher and tougher to not be a cricket. It'll be tougher and tougher to not get the information out. Before I even forget any of this, I'll just go right to it. This will be BTW RLM 269. Although there are not going to be many past casts now, with UCY TV getting the word now that UCY TV will be ending its broadcasts. I think it says Friday. And excuse me for not being all connected up with everybody. I wish I could be more, but that hasn't been the case. So we just kind of listen through. The broadcast channel, UCY.TV, will be stopping. And this Thursday, you'll hear this broadcast is the last time. And we'll have to carry on. Those of you that want to follow the broadcast will definitely have to go find us at reallibertymedia.com. And before I move too far from keep going on that, make sure that Jules does know I truly appreciate all the effort that she did to carry over and pick up. As the other networks started to fail, she picked up all this on her own, had her own health problems, and now that's becoming the focus. Running a network is a real interesting thing to do. A lot of demands and a lot of things. I've come through a couple of networks that had different capacities, different automations, and so there's a lot to know. It's just not something that you pick up. But in this case, we're going to have another network going down. And so the word for all the hosts there are going to be quieted. I hope they all can find places to go. We've had to do this before. I don't necessarily have to do it myself because I'm over at reallibertymedia.com. And for the hosts that are still are interested, I believe I heard, and I haven't talked to Grimner, how unconnected we are for being so connected was one of the concepts in the UCY chat. Was I think Grimner's offered places for hosts if there's slots that are available. And I think he said he'll take you on, and he'll, as he's done for any of us already, gives you a podcast page, which you hear me call is the blogcaster for my page. That's where you find the content that I say BTWRLM 269 for this broadcast. Is you put that in a search engine, and likely you'll find that page or those content links if you are ever in the future, and the files and the stuff is still there. The pages are going to be there. So this is again another thing, is that the donations have to come to the networks to keep up the archives. Equipment goes down, time, energy. I'm doing work behind the broadcast, at the post. We're posting stuff up and moving it around. Sometimes you get help, sometimes you don't. There's a lot of work in all this, but UCY is going to go dark here Friday. And again, thank you, Jules, for all you've done. Just heal yourself up, whatever that is. Heal yourself up. We talk occasionally about that in the chat. So I know you're cognizant of it all, and I'm sure that you're doing this no other reason than I believe you have some more in you. So you want to see that happen. And so I'm hoping for you. I've always had my thoughts to you, but I don't know, what more can we do than to have our best thoughts to you. Dude, again, thank you very much. I'm sure lots of people appreciate the effort and the sacrifices you've been making. So go ahead and wind down right now and get yourself healed up. For those of you that would like to continue to listen to Behind the Woodshed from UCY, we'll definitely have to go to reallibertymedia.com. You might be able to search us out and find us at Spreaker. I'm also encoding right now to Spreaker, which also then allows us to get over to YouTube, which I then take that file and go to BitChute. So there's a lot of work going on behind the broadcast, after the broadcast, to place it in places. Minds.com, you'll be getting the Spreaker re-upload that I do, the better quality one that I can do from here in the post-production. So there's, again, lots of work. The hosts end have a lot of work in the preparation, and typically in the broadcast, in the post, and then the networks are a full-time job. I mean, I don't even know. Full-time doesn't even cover it, and it has its own ball game going with all of that. So sad to see it, UCY going down, but knowing it's a good cause for the reason, and this shows you the importance of keeping the networks on. Not only is the censorship, the attrition can be terrible. The demands are fairly strenuous. And again, freedomsnetwork.com will be going dark on June 20th, 23rd as well, the social network. There's just no donations sufficient to keep it going. Even though there's some people, in particular Grimner, that puts a lot of time to, or has put a lot of time into keeping it going, and monitoring it takes a ton of time, just keeping up with it. So those of you that are listening, and those of you that have appreciated the content of all the hosts on UCY, or those of us at RLM, and there's a lot of time slots available for those of you hosts looking for a place, don't hesitate to contact Grimner. The venues of what I would consider the truth of getting out are limiting themselves. It's just the way, like any other battle. It's like, I tell you, it's a war. It's not a joke. It's what's going on. So, those of you that can, if you could donate to freedomsnetwork.com, at least keep that social network. It's uncensored, folks. It's absolutely open. That keeps going until the 23rd. UCY will be going down on Friday. Those hosts, I hope, will find places. And I heard Shali. I don't usually get able to get in too fast on. I wish I could hear Shali's broadcast. My hours are just not quite right. I got the very end where he was even, as hosts, we consider what is our, where are we going with this? What's it doing? How is it helping? Is it helping? How much more can we repeat the story over and over again? It's kind of that alone is a wearing type of a thing. And I just kind of look past that. I say there's going to be finally one day someone here, one hears the message and orients themselves more correctly for their life, to find it purposeful, to understand this nonsense that we're up against, to actually to put up the first resistance against it, maybe in the first chance. And that's where I come along, like a long time ago. I've been doing this for, I think it's going on a decade now, overall, all the broadcasts, on all the broadcast network. Hey, just running the playlist on Revolution Broadcasting when Raymond had it, when that went all messed up. I tried to keep that going behind the scenes, just making a playlist of all the hosts that stayed for a while, for a year. It was a ton of stress, just trying to keep it up, making it look like it was a normal network. All that, just making a playlist be hourly connected to new content every day, without all the mechanisms, is a ton of work, just that. So there's a whole lot going on that needs to be protected, promoted, and helped, donated to. Otherwise, I've seen it, and why I went to crickets. I know it's maybe boring, maybe it's funny, maybe it's interesting, maybe it is on the point. You understand the point. That population is going to get larger. And that's us not properly responding to what we're up against, which means your future is going the way the people I exposed to you are there with the plan, which is our problem. They win. And if you like to see where this is going that way, don't stand up. Don't make a noise. Don't even engage. Argue with me instead. I mean, this is the whole, I look at people argue with me and I just have to shake my head. I don't even know what to say. I don't even know how to respond. I would wish better for you. But I've got my hands full, so I can do all I can. In fact, I just got finished for as quickly as I can come up with an answer on a lot of these problems. How you address a problem where the system itself is the criminal is really not so simple sometimes. And it took me months to come up with a response I felt comfortable that addressed the future that I believe they're going to try and bring an evasion. And I finally got that project done. It doesn't mean the project's done. It means that part is done. So, on top of that, we did the broadcast. On top of that, I try to bring the tabs, I bring the news, the notice they tell us of what's going on. I don't care, around the world. I can see all elements in what you're going to do locally. Whether you understand that, whether you appreciate it, whether you see it but don't understand how to get at it. It's all, my view is you just need to get involved. Just roll your sleeve up and put your hand in and well, not in the machine, but put your hand in and start to do something. It all becomes a lot clearer, a lot really, really fast. But sitting back and waiting for the right amount of information, or thinking you need to know enough, or making excuses, time goes on, crickets get more, the networks that we need go down. For whatever reason. It's like in this case, how can we at all challenge Jules on being healthy. I mean, it's just what happens in life. Soldiers go down in war, folks. In this case, we're losing a whole battalion, if you will. We're losing a whole bunch of hosts in this battle. And so, it's y'all that are listening, fantastic, thank you very much. But you do have to figure out somewhere where you can throw in. Somebody has to keep up, step up, volunteer, mentor, attach yourself to someone who's doing something so you can learn the ropes, if you will. Like, we can go step back, if you will, step back to the future of guilds and learn how to do it that way. It's why I try to tell you don't listen really to me, don't listen to what I'm saying, go prove out what I'm saying. Go prove out, it takes action. You get it in you. I can guide you, I can knock some of the clutter away for you. I can show you an obscured trail that sits there for you to take if you want to. But you have to tell me that you're interested and earnestly interested. I don't think that Jules would have done this on UCY had there not been a lot of people that she felt were worthy to be presented. So there was people doing there. But it takes this combined effort, and everyone doesn't really know each other. It's kind of fascinating how that works. So it's really, in one way, it's a phenomenon, and all that starts to slip through our hands if we're not engaging and re-engaging it. And then some of these networks themselves, I find it really interesting as well. One of the networks will not take this content. I don't see how not taking this content is going to make a cohesive group of people. And there's no reasons. They act everyone thinks it's just like YouTube that acts in censorship without reason. No, lots of people now have decided they can deny without reason. They can censor without reason. They can shadow ban without reason. And this is our society now. Now, if someone doesn't really like the content, well, that's fine. That's all. Everyone has a decision to make. I understand all that. But to not have a good reason, to not have any reason, just to act as if you're being contrary, just because you can, is really not going to get us down the road of understanding each other and how we can best help each other. And so it's not so simple in some regard. In fact, the reason why I've told you this, looking around at other networks when the Oracle thing, when Doug stopped Oracle, I had a lot of decisions to make on, did I want to get back into that broadcasting politics? And I don't. That's not my time. That's not me. I have nothing to, I really don't have anything to do with that. A lot of backstabbing in the background, backbiting goes on around some of this stuff. So it's not so simple generally. And so I decided I would just take again, my whole decisions certainly over the last 15 years has been to focus, refine down to what I can do, what I can continue to do. Why I come here every Sunday is because I've worked very hard to commit to address the oppression. And I've committed to do this, and I've set up my scheduling, my life, in order that can continue to happen. And I've been fortunate that I can do that. May one day end. But it requires this refining and this refocusing all the time. How many things I don't do anymore that I throw down, I throw away, I don't even engage it that I used to, because it becomes so overwhelming. Because the decisions that you make, you continue as a host, you come on and you say, like last night I'm having trouble, what am I putting together for people? My perception is, except for a few of you, there's nobody's listening. And so why would I want to spend my time? I think Clint Richardson said it. Why would I want to spend my time for a couple hundred people when I can get to thousands if I just take my time and spend it somewhere else? And so this dynamic is always in someone who's attempting to present information. And so there needs to be some reflection, and when there's not, the question starts. So I'm looking last night, what am I going to put on my tabs for today? My imagination starts to wander. I got all kinds of stuff and ideas that pop up that isn't this broadcast. But if you're not going to listen, then what am I going to say? Again, there's some of you that do, and that's why I keep coming back. It only takes one help somewhere that I know. I've been involved. I've seen the destruction that people in government, thinking they are authoritative, have done to other people, to know that if I help one of you out of that kind of problem, that's all it is. And when I see people that don't have that amount of destruction that they're facing in their life and don't help, really, I wonder about us as people. When you don't have that pressure and you don't go help, that's pretty amazing to me, because that's when you're free. I know now that's when you're free to do. That's when you're really free to do something. You're no threat. There's no threat to you. Your mind is clear. It's partly how I just confine. It's another thing I don't know if people know. I may have said it, maybe I didn't. I do not engage for myself in a lot of things. Doesn't mean I don't do something, but I don't go out and I don't attempt, because of all I know, to bring onto myself a challenge. Because what that does is it binds up your mind it becomes now something that you get. It's like you don't want to be your own attorney, if you will. But if I look out for someone and find a problem, I can address that problem in a neutrality, much more objective. And I've been much better able to do that and move great strides. That I know that if you don't have a pressure in your life, but you see a problem, and you don't go address it, not a problem for you, but just a problem, you're really diminishing what you actually could do when in the fact of the condition where it's not a jeopardy to you. Everyone listening to me, if you don't have a jeopardy to you, but you see a wrong and don't go address it, you're missing 2 powers right there by not doing that. And so I say that, not to condemn you, just to make you think about that. We can take on, possibly, a lot of us can take on a little bit extra load. I certainly figured it out that I can. I told you, sometimes I can't do everything, but I can do what I can do. And then there's a limit, and we make that decision too. So the hosts, not that I talk to anybody, the hosts, you can hear it, the frustration, you can hear what we're talking about, you can hear we come every week. The hosts need a platform, and then they need to continue to speak, because those of us that are doing this, are in the trenches, know that part's important, no matter how many want to listen or don't. My utopia would be lots of people listening to what I'm saying, applying what I say, and we go out there as a big army of people doing stuff. Because I already see how that would overwhelm the system. And I don't mean in any derogatory way. I mean, there's a path to make this thing work a lot more efficiently than it has been. The reason why it's not is because the occupiers have taken it over. And the occupiers are meant on your destruction. And then they made it look like that was the warm and fuzzy thing, and you said, okay. Instead of looking at the principle behind it and saying, wait a minute, that wasn't supposed to be that way. It literally was not to be that way. That you're there doing that, we have now a 2-step problem. We better resolve that now, because we were up to the masses to be vigilant in our so-called liberty. And I can address liberty. I say, I kind of avoid the word liberty a bit, but remember, we got this, we can go at the inalienable and unalienable. Where you have a society and you have certain capacities within in that society, they're considered civil liberties, not civil rights, civil liberties. And that's proper. It's what you've done for yourselves. It's a bunch of people getting together to do for yourselves. To deny all that's kind of boneheaded to me. I don't get all that. But anyway, it doesn't matter. If you're not doing anything anyway, you're not effectual either way. You can complain all you want, it doesn't do anything. But we have an occupation here like we have occupations all over the world. And they're bent on your destruction. And they do things, and they get away with it all the time, and they continue to get away with it, and they're going to get more destruction. And this is why I even touch some of the stuff that happens around the world. But to me, it's just a big mirror of reflection. If we're going to be open enough and honest for ourselves, we have to start seeing this fractal, if you will, this reflection of the minor to the mini to the macro, the nano to the mini. It's all this big jump. It just depends on the scope. But it all has the same methodology. Destruction all comes through the same methods. They've learned well these techniques, and so why change them? Because they've learned well that you will not interfere with any of it. You will not listen to someone like myself. You will argue with me instead of saying, wait a minute, let me go try what he's saying first. Now, maybe my history doesn't show that would work. Well, maybe I listened wrong. Maybe I need to do something a little bit more refined. But if you don't do that and you buy into the defeat, it's done. I mean, I don't know what else to say. It's self-evident right there. But so occupiers occupiers destroy, and they have their own agenda. They could care less about your laws. They could care about less about you. It's like the step beyond anarchy. It's not chaos because they're coming with a plan, which is your problem. See, anarchy is supposed to actually, not the newfangled definition, it's a group of people inside a system that do not agree with parts of that system. And a lot of people I hear are really doing that, but they'll deny it. If you take on anything of this civil society we know as the United States of America or a state, you're there. I mean, I don't know what else. You can't deny it. You're kind of a hybrid, aren't you? I'm not saying I'm not. I'm saying that's us. And so that's a reality. You start disregarding that, then you start looking a little bit foolish, at least from my perspective. As I've said, you don't deny an authority that has the power to do something to you outside of your consent. And that should have focused some people on some problems too, because a lot of this, they just take consent. And we use it as a word most of the time, the presumption. That doesn't fill it either, but that's as close as I'll get here now. There's a presumption of this. Well, that's not provable. I mean, that's rebuttable, so that means it's not definite. They're not ultimately definite. And so there's your issue. But hey, if you don't think this way, it doesn't matter. See, you're just going to rail against the machine, so to speak, and not realize that we're part of it. That's why we're here. Deny all the good parts of it, throw the baby out with the bathwater, stand in our self-righteousness, and do nothing to stop the occupier. Well, it turns around and shoots the guy next to you, and all your denial that it doesn't happen because, by gosh, we're supposed to be living in peace. And everyone disregarded the fact that no one's living in peace, and it's not going to happen, and that's a reality of this world. I don't know why. It's not. I don't agree with it, but that's the way it is. I can't live peaceful. I don't know why. In all my intention to do so, I can't. Why? Because there's others that don't believe that. There's others that have their own intention. And no belief in my intention to be peaceful is going to stop that. I don't know why, but it's there. We're given indications of that it's going to be there, and we can disregard it if we want. We can just complain and moan and whine about it. Or we're going to have to take responsibility and start to do something. And that's kind of where I'm at. Because what I see is a reflection, which a lot of people see, but they don't think they make the connection. The consistencies around the world, I don't care what kind of government you call it, those inside the government, the caucusocracy has taken over, and you were required to stop it. I don't care where you were required to stop it. And you didn't. And then you just complained about it. That doesn't do anything. Because, as we see in the Liber Code, you know them by their deeds. In other words, their action is what you're dealing with. What they do is what you have to contend with, not what they say. And so when you're just saying, that's the same thing, it's the same problem for them. They don't have a problem with what you say. So, occupiers kill, occupiers destroy. We're talking a reflection that goes on, supported by the United States government over there in the Middle East, called Israel. We call them Israelis. I've gone through to my mind, a very definite proof to distinguish, and I did the distinguishment with the pre-48, post-48. I think that's a pretty good line. In fact, it came up again. While these people in post-48 claim a title, they build a wall around the people who have the right to the land. They are occupier. The people who built the wall, call it a fence, are without right. And then they are an occupier, and then they murder people and get away with it underneath the protection and funding of the United States government. Proved out, I don't know how much, unless this was, well, she's close enough. This could be, in a way, this doesn't even rise to the level of shooting or killing a baby, because that's kind of gone by. That's in a memory hole. We don't care anymore that babies get bombed by these occupiers. But in the news, if you don't think occupiers are problems, you don't see the destruction around you where you live. I say it's in your town where you live. You may not see it, but that's a blindness. You have no eyes to see. I'm asking you to get those eyes, and whether or not you want to take the responsibility to do it, and then see it, and then take on the responsibility to do something about it, that's on you. I don't know more. You make that decision. You make all those decisions. But we don't continue, we don't stop this thing. It turns out to be where we find out just what happens in the week since the last time I talked. A Palestinian paramedic shot dead by Israeli forces in Gaza. And I say Israeli forces in Gaza. It's Zionistas, folks. It's not Israelites, and it's not those that Israel begat. This is a demonstrably political movement that has been foisted on a people in that area. And I say that, and I can point to you in the United States of America, the very same things foisted on every place in the governments now through different intentions. All end up doing the same outcome, if you will. If you don't really see this, or you think it's over there, you're missing the big point. It's probably why you don't listen behind the woodshed much. You know better, but you won't do anything more about it. A Palestinian paramedic, she's 21, a female, folks, shot in the back by an Israeli sniper. How, and justified, so-called, by these occupiers. Cannot be a world that you agree to continue to live in. You think it's happening in the United States any different, or you think it's happening in other countries where the cops, the military, is killing your people? Innocent people? How much more innocent, if you will, in purpose and intention do you get as a female paramedic going to help other people who have been wounded to be murdered shot in the back? How much of an insult did that used to be in Western days, to be shot in the back? How much of a scoundrel coward were you to do that to somebody? How much are we agreeing now is no longer part of our principles in us? There was some discussion, again, an outrage. It's an outrage. I hope there's an actionable thing. Lots of reports about this medic that was shot, sniped. Why? Because she was close to a fence. That was her crime. She was close to a fence. Really, remember, this fence is illegal. It's on land that doesn't belong to the people who built the fence, and that fence is the border of a concentration camp that she wasn't even touching. And they shot her. And they killed her as she was trying to give aid to others and had been giving aid to hundreds of others. And then we hear, and I couldn't qualify this. It appears, and there's been a question to this, so just hold this out. I want to talk about connecting it up to the United States. It appears, and this, I can't qualify it, what I'm saying is this could be fake news as well. But then a report came out that somebody says that a girl from Boston who joined the Israeli army was the sniper. And people are cool with that. So if you don't think we're connected to the United States at the hip to Israel anyway, we got people over there pretending to be Israeli army that are sniping people that are on their own land. So I have some links if you want. They went through Twitter. One thing I do want to say this week, and one of my problems presenting the broadcast content, I noticed this week it was very hard to find accurate information. A lot harder than I had ever seen before. And I don't know if that's an alarm that we need to be aware of. Very conditional type statements. Lots of things promoted this week. Very hard to get through the truth. So I'm going to, like this story about the Bostonian that's the sniper, I couldn't find verification of it. The problem is with the censorship of the media, there's no other stories to go find out if you don't go there. This is another problem with the censorship or the misreporting. The alternative proofs are hard to come by. This week was the toughest. This is one of those stories that someone called Rebecca from Boston was an IDF soldier, apparently maybe a dual citizen, that went over there to shoot someone that lived on their own land. And we tend to think that's okay because I haven't heard that the Department of Justice is going to go pluck her out and charge her for cold-blooded murder. But that's another thing. If that's not, if she didn't do that and it was a Facebook fake news, well, I don't know what else to say. My point is, look at the propaganda that they're stirring up about that. It isn't bad enough, and what are they covering? It isn't bad enough that the Israelis get covered by this story for what they did as justification. Is that we stop focusing on them as the lawless, murderous occupier. And this is the thing I'm focused on. These are not of Israel, the man. These are of a political movement, which I can absolutely attack. It's an idea that's been foisted upon a bunch of people, and now, how much more innocent, if you will. See, it's not just innocence here. It's innocent in purpose, innocent intent, innocent, and then, if you will, Samaritan helping, that was snuffed. Having no actual threat to someone who has no right to be in the place anyway, causing it. And yet we get Nikki Haley over there in the UN actually supporting this stuff. It's got to be the height of delusion and psychopathy. And if that's what they're going to do at the federal level, that ripples through the system, that ripples through the states, that comes down and through to you. As I've explained to you, your states are not much different than the federal, in particular with the 14th Amendment, if you understand how that works without all the hoopla around it, just how the mechanics of it. You realize there's not much distinction here. What's happening in Israel is happening in your hometown. Innocent people are being destroyed. I don't care where I look in the system. There's people in the system. The government to me is an inert framework. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what you call it. It's people inside have now taken license to be the lawless, murderous, destructive occupier in our lives, globally. But Nikki Haley, a representative of the United States government, is totally okay with all this. They made a big deal about, well, the medic was too close to the fence. Now, I responded, with all due respect to that point, who of any import cares about the distance to the fence? She could have been leaning on the fence. That wouldn't justify any response, let alone murdering her. Besides, the fence is evidence of a pre-existing high crime against the Palestinians. And you folks in the United States of America don't even understand that the government is doing the very same thing to you on your land. You don't even understand the underlying immunity that's built into this. You will not stand up in your law. You will not present it. You will just agree that there's a right to impose upon you and destroy you around it, giving over questions of whether or not the government can come in and do this to you. Now we come under all kinds of excuses about it. But again, to me, it's just a consistent reflection. I don't see a difference. What matters? What does it matter? Any distance inside the concentration camp fence, any distance, a medic helping other people would give anybody the right to murder somebody, is what's being allowed to go on. It's what's being allowed to go on in the States when a cop murders someone who would be assumed, at least not even presumed now, right? Just assumed to be innocent until proven guilty. Now we've allowed the magic phrases to come over and destroy all of that. It got getting so bad. The criminality, the war crimes are so bad now that the rest of the nations are really having to take stock in what they're agreeing or not agreeing to. And we're maybe seeing the first bits of the cracking porcelain at the UN level, where this so-called nation states. You see, when they made nation states, they diminished nations. And what you see there, it's like the States of the Union, the United States, they're underneath the District of Columbia. That's what a nation is supposed to be sovereign on its own. But what they've done in they created the nation state was to then put it in union with a bunch of other nations, diminishing their national status and sovereignty and furthering the other jurisdiction that they're all part of union of, which is the UN destruction. So nation states that they keep saying are not really the good thing. It's just nations that have been destroyed. Your nations have been destroyed in preference to this impotent organization, which really is just used as a mechanism to continue oppression in the UN, and by different means, and by different methods. Again, it's multidimensional. The United States is isolated at UN, vetoes popular resolution, and finds no backers for an anti-Hamas bill. It is starting to see the epitome of the embarrassment of the world to even to try to agree with what the United States said, while the United States denies recognizing the problems of the genocide and that's going on over there in Gaza by lawless, murderous Zionistas. They're occupiers. It's a political movement that had been given force and effect by the United States and Britain and funded and protected. The United States attempted to pass the idea that Hamas was the cause of that. And only 2 people voted with it. The rest, two people in there representing nations, showing that they're not going with it right now. I was happy to see this part. But what an embarrassment Nikki Haley is in promoting this. What an embarrassment upon the nation, the people it's supposed to represent. And then having the gall to turn around and say, because people wanted to go after the real murderer, that somehow that showed the allegiance in the world against justice. It's got to be the height of a delusional mind and a psychopathic personality. You might say, well, it doesn't matter. It's in New York in a building talking about some place in the Middle East. Well, that's your government's representation, the one that oppresses you in the United States. It's the same attitude. It's the same one that uses all these legalities and so-called loopholes and so-called legalistic obstructions in order to keep you confined and keep the pressure down. I told you, the whole object of an occupier is to keep the mass of the people from rising up sufficiently to take out the occupier. That's why they built that fence over there, so-called fence. It's a buffer and a barrier because they realized they actually couldn't. This little murderous band of Zionistas. You're not supposed to interfere with the population if you're an occupier sufficiently to cause them to rise up. And you're watching Gaza as a proof of that. Everything that's taken away they knew would be used against them as a righteous response to an occupier. What's the problem is that it's being funded by an organized criminal syndicate called the United States. That's on the back of the people because that's supposedly in the world be a representative democracy. We're so dumbed down and so celebritized and so mind controlled as a populace. We don't see a problem with any of this. How bad is it when nobody backs a U.S. resolution at all, folks? How truly bad is it when the United States turns around and says, because all you nations voted the other way, we see how you are, and we know that we're the righteous ones, and you're an evil. It is really the height of insanity, and we're agreeing to all that. So I want to say this one more time. I wrote it out for someone who brought up the idea of the diminishing borders of the Palestinian area in favor of the Zionistas. And I want you to hear this because I said it before. I put it in a Twitter. I confined this statement down to whatever will fit in a Twitter, which is something that I believe needs to be presented everywhere you talk about this. And it may need, after a while, the conversation, if you ever get there, to be adjusted slightly. But this is where I'm starting and finishing. There is no borders that are expanding over in Israel by the Zionistas. Those are lawless occupations of land. And I talked to you about how to resolve this down by land and by title right, and even by the biblical style of the antecedent authority that the Zionistas might claim but can't actually grasp or meet, was that I responded to the idea that the borders have been changing to say that the post-1948 Zionistas are murderous occupiers having no actual borders. Any state and border claims are fraudulent and deception. Pre-48 Israelites claiming Judea would be confined to Bethlehem and Southerly. Rest of Palestine going to others Israel begat, and by tribal, quotation, tribal location. Explains the problem of the injection of the cancer post-48 as a political movement on a land that was in historical fashion and understanding already inhabited by a certain tribes of people that came from a man. All these tribes came from a man in history. And the Zionistas of post-48 cannot make the claims to the what Israel begat. And I say begat very importantly because when you go look at the source, it has to come from the physical seed of a man, not from his ideas. And therefore we find a very fast way to get at the truth of this. And when I go right to there, that little short paragraph I read pretty well lines it up for me. I don't know about you all, but this is my position on this because I'm getting sick and tired of watching the innocents be murdered underneath the collar of authority. You already know, I've explained to you, authority that comes to take out somebody or their rights or their remedies under a color of that authority without actual warrant is a criminal, a felon, multiple felonies. By the commission of that act, those acts, and by the omission of doing what the law was to guide. When you have lawlessness, they can't come with any warrant at all. Any action is a crime. I don't have to get all wrapped up in the sentiment of it. I look at the principle underlying this. And if you can't see what I just said happening in Israel to the Palestinians, in Palestine, by the Zionistas, to the inhabitants called the Palestinians, whether or not you extend it to Israelites, it doesn't really matter to me at this point. When you get to see that a lawless action, depriving people, in this case, let's say the medic, of life, they don't have this lawlessness doesn't have the right to impose an excuse. When that one lost their life, you just watch the one who did it commit multiple felonies. Is the very same action and destruction, I tell you, is the same answer in the United States of America. And in any so-called civilized arena, jurisdiction. It'll happen in all countries, if you know what you're looking for. And if I can show you, since I did just show you and explain that a unwarranted stolen right, property, liberty, whatever, life, is done under the color of an authority is a high crime, the highest, and you don't see that's happening to you in the lands where you live, you're not listening to me. You don't either intend to listen to me, or you're not intending, or you'll know already that when you listen to me, you're going to have to do something to stop the very thing that's happening over, that I keep telling you is happening over there in Gaza, is happening to you, the open-air prison wherever you live. And it's happening by the very fact because you're not doing something. Because I don't know what else. There's another principle in this world that the bad rises to the top very quickly. And if you're not persistent, vigilant, and persistent to keep it down, it rises up. Like a bad weed. The post-48 Zionistas are murderous occupiers having no borders. Any state and border claims are fraudulent and deception. Pre-48 Israelites, claiming Judea would be confined to Bethlehem and southerly, the rest of Palestine going to the others Israel begat and by their tribal location. I've just defined for you ancient Palestine. Is not the Israelis, is not the Zionistas. I keep telling you, they lost the T-E-S at the end of that name if they wanted to be legitimate, and then they lost the fact that they would be located south of Jerusalem, not in Jerusalem, for that tribe. And yet people, as posiers, are murdering medics trying to help their own people. And I hear crickets. I hear literal crickets. I can hear them, folks. I know maybe I'm going nuts now. I'm hearing them. I'm hearing the silence. You know, how crazy is that? I'm hearing the silence, folks, of our societies who will only go out and just throw some letters on a sign and protest and be gassed and be water tanked, just like the government wants you to. That's all we do. Again, if you're not seeing the correlation between that innocent, onerous action by the medic to be snuffed out by someone lawless, and you don't see that correlation in what's going on in your societies, I don't know about y'all. I really don't. It's not that hard to see. In fact, that's what makes you all complain, but it's not just something about complaining. That complaint has to be now moved into an action. In other words, I come here and I talk, yak. I can do all the yakking. I can do all the typing. For as bad as I do the typing, I can do the typing. We can do yak all day, but you know, when I get it back around on Monday, I have to open up look at my projects. I have to start pulling them down. I have to start going to work on those projects, and hopefully in a very short time I've got something in the real world that is going to be an action from that work that's going to make a difference somewhere, somehow, however small the step is that's being made forward to correct a wrong, until the next Sunday comes and I'm back here yakking. In other words, there's a whole lot of days working and an indulgence of only a few hours yakking that actually gets things done in the world. I mean, I just think about this medic being sniped, and then watch the excuses and the support and the funding the United States gives to all that. I don't even know if again, what do you call that? What's the adjective for this sort of crime, this evil? And why are we tolerant of it? Why do we accept? Why are we so accepting? And why are we susceptible to accept these kinds of things? Again, I keep thinking about the protocols of the elders of Zion. That's the basics of a human, if you will, your nature developed for you in print. It's your operation manual of those that want to exploit you, are the techniques that allow us to be exploited, and are the reasons probably why we're not, and I say probably because I don't know of all the reasons, why we don't truly respond correctly. In fact, I think the true intelligence is exposed through something. It's a transparent condition those that might argue with someone might either like with me or like me, or just have a, not necessarily a direct argument, but an indirect argument. No, you can't engage what I'm saying because you are also intelligent and you know that to do that would require your action. Is probably a deeper failure. And all I can ask you is to rethink that position and throw that down in you and move forward into a new position of taking responsibility. And there's going to be a local medic near you that goes down. Even innocent people, just innocent people. It doesn't have to be what society views as someone doing honorable things, caring for other people that gets taken down. Anyone who's innocent, that has no evil intent, or has not even evil intent, just the wrong intent. Even someone making an accident doesn't deserve to die. Doesn't deserve to be put in a condition of destruction. Doesn't be put into a condition where you're taken advantage of by the system and exploited, rendered by the machine, like so much hamburger. Human resource. Everyone wants to say, oh, well, it's a natural resource. Well, you're a natural resource. When you're a human resource, you're probably the most valuable one to those that would exploit you. That's why they gave you that title. And you didn't think nothing of it. In fact, you go down to work, you go right to the HR department, don't you? Now, everybody at Google had this big old problem with the drones for military purposes, but they'll go down to the HR and agree that they're these little animal slaves working for this fiction. For what it wants, and it wants its bottom line. That's it. Why do we do that to ourselves? I'm so far off of my tabs, I don't even know. But human resource and how they get it, how they get you tied into a fictional system and the fiat. We know about the fiat system and all this, and I'm trying to warn you off of the next one coming. I've told you it's already a debt system. It's this blockchain technology applied to currency officially. It's another servitude. It's another way of your destruction. And everyone will talk about gold and silver coin, but no one will actually really get down to doing anything with it. No, I can't do that. It's too much trouble. So much easier to do it, to plug in and just make excuses. I guess it's not going to be easy. The wars are not easy. Victory is not easy. Obviously, maintenance of your peace was not easy either, and they stole it from you. To the point that a country will support another tool called the Zionistas to go murder innocent people, and nobody but a bunch of people going, that's no good, it's a war crime, will do anything more about it, not recognizing their own governments do that to them. What I keep telling you about, you think it's over there, you're living it. You're living it in it, however slightly it's different, so that you're accepting of it. That's the occupier, keeping the pressure up so that you don't pay attention. It's that boiling frog syndrome we've been told? The raising the water up just up. They keep it just enough that you don't die. And you eventually start thinking it's comfortable. How they have us all worked out. And so this next iteration going into finance is another control grid, another occupation on your life. And I'm not talking occupations like going to work, because those occupations are permitted and licensed too, aren't they? Right? Until you find out about land law. Then there's occupations of the land. They're not permittable. They're not licensable. They're grants. And when you finally understand the distinction, when I'm talking about there, the light might just go on for you all, but we'll see. It seems to periodically people start getting it. There's a distinction. There's a subtlety that is missed by, I think, everybody. It's why I come at this different. I seem to come at it different. It's why people don't understand me, I think, if they don't understand me. If that's not a telltale thing to keep responsibility from everybody. There's a subtlety being missed by a lot of people, and I'm just sad it isn't being seen and being worked with. And once you see it, those that I talk with and show, and they finally get it, they realize what it is. It's kind of interesting, because we all of a sudden get real quiet. Now we get real contemplative, and we start really realizing what's up. I always find that pretty fascinating.
All of a sudden we find out we don't know so much, but we do have to know something. And it has to be the right thing, and it has to be applied right way. They don't have to any more conversation. That's why all the yak and continued yak is just kind of like a turnoff anymore. I'd certainly like to do some more wonderful things and discuss things that way, but that's not seemingly the fact of what we need to be doing. And we're being brought into and drug into another one. We're told it was coming long time ago. I was told when I was a kid this was coming. I told you, I couldn't imagine how it was happening. How can this be? How can you have a cashless society that's worldwide? How do you even do that? I'm so unaware, actually. I'm just a little guy that just goes through the world, having a great time. Thought I was having a great time. But that's what they wanted us to believe. And then we got us into, you're having a miserable time, but you're nice with the miserable time because it's not as miserable as the guy next to you. How's that one? And then there's so many miserable people, we're just in the same boat. We'll make it better. Nobody lifts a finger to do a dang thing about it, but that's okay. We'll make it. We got lots of words. So anyways, going into this financial destruction, this control grid that apparently people don't recognize. It's in this blockchain technology. And like I said, it's a way, I believe I see a way that it can be used as a tool for good, and yet the caucustocracy uses it as a tool for them. See, it's not bad from their perspective, it's good for them, but from us, it's pretty evil. But an interesting things popped up again about the occupier telling you in a side way, advertising what's on the horizon. And you have to understand that this is almost like fiction. I don't mean like the fiction like a straw man or the fiction like a state. I'm talking like a novel. This just comes out to you like a movie. It comes to you like science fiction. It comes to you like some novel. Some story. All the characters can change in all this. But it's a story that drops a seed. It plants a seed or gives you the notice. It came up here pretty interestingly through Twitter. Got a link from Catherine Austin Fitz. I think we talked about it last week. The Deep State Wet Dream presents its, quote, revolutionary anonymous self. Was a link to an article from Blockchainist. And it was a discussion about something in a state, United States of Bitcoin, if I remember correctly. And I apologize here, I don't have that link. So I'm going to have to do it from memory. But here it is, since this would be a tab for me anyway. The United States of Bitcoin, located in Nevada, where they're going to start a Bitcointopia. And they're going to, when you go read the text and you go read through it, you put on your international law mind, and you realize they're talking state of the country, international. They talk about integration with the system, all going through this little utopian idea using blockchain technology, the United States of Bitcoin. And if you look very carefully at this little story, this little intention, as Catherine Austin Fitz says, this is the revolutionary anonymous self telling you. This is what's in control, and this is what's happening, and this is what's going on. And I'm telling you, don't look at it literally, look at it principally. They're telling us in this little statement, this little story, how it's laying out, how this is coming through. And the better the ones that you to discern, you'll see the steps and the nesting of how this all works. You'll see the trusts that are set up. You'll see the surrogates that are set up, and how this story is written, which brings to me Catherine Austin Fitz's interpretation that this is the disclosure. And as I tell you, you can't forget about the name Bitcoin. It's the blockchain. Is the same. It doesn't matter what the name is. It's the technology, the principle underlying how the technology will work. It's the principle underlying the steps that they're being taken in order to do this. This report explains a scenario by which you will have your utopia as the so-called deep state. I don't think it's deep state, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what. It's a name. It's just a thing. It's a title. It's just a couple words. But your deep state sits there to explain what's happening. It's there for you to see that Catherine Austin Fitts identifies. The so-called, quote, revolutionary, it's not revolutionary to those that are the planners. This is the execution of the plan. And they tell us everything. This story, this little idea, this utopian idea notion being written about, you can see inside its discussion, and it's detailed enough in certain aspects to say, yeah, this is the notice to us of how it's rolling out. And it's, I'm just telling you, it's confirming more and more what I've been telling you about the problem of the dark side of so-called Bitcoin. It's the caucusocracy using it against you. It's the technology they use, and they attach the utility to that technology. To me, it seems to simply, it's a digital ledger, folks. But it's a digital ledger that has a so-called intelligence that can work with data. And then you're going to find out they're going to take all these separate blockchain subject matters, and they'll tie it into like a master blockchain in every aspect of your life. And we heard about that last week when I talked about the China condition and your social credit. It's social debt. But before I move over to there to remind you about that one, we have this so-called revolutionary anonymous self is letting you know that this Bitcoin stuff is for real, and we're bringing this on. We're going to call it Utopia, United States of Bitcoin. We're going to give the idea. We're going to drop the seed, and let's see how this takes off, while we're getting very close to implementing it all over the place, all over the world. And then this report comes, or this little story off of Zero Hedge comes up, which I always find interesting. I don't know why. To me, I see them coming in batches of notice to us. Ethereum creator asks, and I was thinking, why is an Ethereum creator even going to ask this question? But here it is. Ethereum creator asks, do Rothschilds control cryptocurrencies? What I found interesting is this cryptocurrency dude decides the old money elite have no control of this place, and that will charge ahead independent of the Rothschild dynasty, if you will. Just upon the holdings of the Rothschild family around the globe, I'd say the guy, I have a hard time not thinking the guy's a bit myopic. A bit. When I exposed to you weeks and weeks ago, maybe months now, time has been really flying against this, me and all this, but that the blockchain is attaching itself to debt, and recognized as such in the IRS doing so. And I hear this question, it's completely uninformed. But Ethereum came up at an interesting time. And it came up as a contract inclusion for blockchain that I could see was a serious threat, given all of the so-called contracts that you're involved in, in the government with government. That this is not an inconsequential question at this time, because he's dismissing the connection, which puts most people's mind at rest that it can't happen because he says so. What I found interesting, though, beyond all this, because a lot of it's just conjecture and rhetoric anyway, just talking. We don't know. I don't know how I just see the connections. I see they're already connecting up the system that the Rothschilds control. It's already being connected up. But what was interesting was what it's reported the Rothschilds are doing. How minuscule they are in this. Remember, cryptocurrency is not the world. It's a very minuscule piece of the whole monetary fiscal thing in the world. This is infinitesimal thing. And it's been given such a great sway and control. That, the Rothschilds have to be involved or not, or they're so small compared to it. No. These are a false setup. But let's get to the point about this. I told you, relative to blockchain, But there's a good side, if you will, and the bad side, if you will. I mean, it's good for the bad if that's what they're doing. But for us, it could have a utility. But I said for it to be better, before you can even really be beyond speculation and wagering, the gambling part of it, you'd have to do a couple of things. And one I told you was make it private, absolutely privatize it. Keep it away from that system attempting to attach itself. And the other thing I told you, and I referenced this to the cannabis coins, and if you're interested in all those, contact Grimner. I'd see him. He's really into all that stuff. I wish I had more time to be interested. I think it's kind of cool. But you would have to tie it to, and I use cannabis because it's obvious. It's a product. It's a production-oriented, landed condition. It's based in the production of the land. Why do I look at that? Because that's where this land disposal law is all based. And why do I say that? That is because it's an asset. It's an actual wealth, not debt. It can't be commingled. That's what I've told you before, would begin to set up a blockchain technology that was more substantial and more impervious, and nothing's impervious, but more impervious to this organized criminal syndicate called government. And then you'd have to nest that inside of private contracts that can't be imposed and all this other stuff. You'd have to have a knowledge of the environment that you're in order to nest this technology that I think has a way to go to privatize it. But again, not as an end-all be-all, just as another tool to make things literally more efficient for us and maybe less costly, although that's not seemingly to be the key either. That's the excuse the government's running versus printing coin, or minting coin, but it ends up not being true in some regard. But getting over to the point, what did they reduce? What did this guy talk about? First, he dismisses the Rothschilds. He dismisses that they have any control of the debt system. Dismisses that blockchain's connecting up to that in so many different ways. But what do they say in this report about what the Rothschilds connection could be? I found fascinating. Reports about IMMO first surfaced in local cryptocurrencies industry press last week. What was that IMMO? Darn it. Excuse me, I'm sorry, I don't have it right up here, but it's an opaque, they describe it, listen carefully, they describe it as an opaque IMMO blockchain project that the so-called banking dynasty is reportedly investing in. So what are the Rothschilds looking at? Not Bitcoin. Not necessarily Ethereum, since I don't know what's inside IMMO project. I'm just saying they're not doing the public stuff, the consumer stuff. No, they're looking very particularly at an opaque blockchain, a private blockchain. What's the other thing that they point out about in this article? Trying to dismiss the control that the Rothschilds may or may not have. They're saying that this opaque project is leaking out information, and so that's questionable. Notwithstanding that, I'll take this on face value because it essentially confirms what I told you has to happen. If you're going to use a blockchain, you have to have a couple of these elements. What does it go on to say about this project? The reports about this IMMO project first service in local cryptocurrency industry last week, just now happening, just bleeding out. While all information is based on rumors and leaked information, the crypto society has said it can be a digital token backed by natural resources like gold or somehow related to real estate. So, who am I to say, folks? The Rothschilds are investing their time and energy in an opaque, a private project which values its token by production or land, real estate. Who am I to say against that dynasty? Is what I told you needs to be done, the beginning, the base, the rudiments of how to do this, is what the dynasty he would say doesn't have any effect is doing. They are privatizing even their own stuff against the debt system. And they're based in land and production. Folks, I keep telling you, this land disposal law, you have to understand it. It does something. And it's partly why the control of it's so darn important, and in international law, and what the arrogance, the hubris of the Zionistas over there in Palestine are saying, well, we got the land, what are you going to do about it? Well, there's an international order that may do something. I'm hoping it happens at some point, maybe not in my lifetime. But somehow that gets righted. But we're not going to do it being crickets. But this protection regards this asset and wealth is based in land. Why it's so important. My point on this is the Rothschild empire is interested in a particular type of blockchain technology. And it had two qualities. One, it's private, opaque. I interpret as private. Absolutely closed door private. And number two is it's based in something of wealth, or if you will, resource. Something that continues to hold value. Now, let's go outside in the world and see what just happened recently. Didn't Venezuela just do that? Didn't they base their Pedro, whatever their new crypto blockchain technology currency is, on their oil? Now why? Well, because if something fails, you can go grab the oil and you can use the oil because it has an alternative value, like gold is usable in some regard, although less, if you will, on a consumptive level. Like silver is much more usable than gold, but its price is less, so it doesn't make any sense there somehow. But notwithstanding that, there's utility in a, if I can say commodity, in a product, or the land. You can do something to retain value, tangible value. There's a way to continue a value, a real value, that doesn't exist when your electrons get shut off. That doesn't exist when you're based on derivative contracts that a few criminals agree, white-collar criminals agree is currency. Rothschilds are investing time and energy in an opaque blockchain project that's going to base itself in wealth. They are not basing it in something that's based in debt and public, or accessible by public, which is government, like the IRS. When I say opaque and private, those of you that have known to discern what I'm saying here in private, it kicks you even to another level, beyond. It's not just you private. There's a whole establishment and construction for that privacy. Whether you understand what it is at all or not, or whether I understand is irrelevant. It's there to do, and these people do it. They know to do it. Is your guide. And my word to you, my discussion to you on those of you that are paying attention, pay attention to this. It's just out now. Those that are in the hub of decision of the world on everything that's debt are not investing in that debt for their own private enterprises. They've created their own, or looking to invest into. See, they don't even do it themselves. They take from the brains of somebody else to do what they need to do, and they're not looking public, and they're not looking in the debt system to do that. Is a clue for those of you that are into the crypto, into the blockchain really, and want to think that you're moving down the road more than just a hobby, or more than just a, the wager, the game, the speculation, and you want to do something for people in the future, in the liberty side of this. I can use the word liberty in that because that's a constructed infrastructure, constructed environment that you have to participate with, or you're outside it. So inside that there's rules, and that's the liberty. It's the extent of those rules. Even the even the structure of it has its own limitation. The physicality has a restriction. So that's a liberty. So when we get into understanding these words, though I would not allow liberty in undefined for myself, and I try not to speak about it too much, once you define it and that's agreeable, then I have no problem with that. It's kind of like the word person. The word person, I don't have a problem with the word person, but I won't talk about it in general. You hardly ever hear me talk about it. You hardly ever hear them use the word. Because it has a very particular thing it's doing. Particular thing that's going on there. And until we define that that thing is going on, I have no need to use the word person. It's a legalism. But it doesn't mean it's not useful. Once we can define that, and it's confined to that definition or that context, that framework, I can use it freely. But most people have an unawareness of its use and utility and where and how and the extents. And so I prefer not to use those words because they cause confusion. It's like dealing in grants. They're a civil creation, so they're considered a privilege and an immunity within the context of an inalienable right, not an unalienable right. They're within the context of a construct. And I'm asking people to listen to the subtleties of what I'm saying, because I'm talking in those areas. I'm talking, well, you're either in there or you're not, or when I use this word, I mean it in this context. It's not all perfect. I don't talk in total accuracy, but I talk in specifics enough that we should be able to hear the distinctions. But getting back over to the blockchain, those that are wanting to use it, and Russia would not address Venezuela, notwithstanding the asset, until they had a discussion. And once it was worked out what the reality of the Venezuelan currency, or the crypto so-called currency was going to be doing, and the contract arrangements that they could utilize this medium or indicator of value, then Russia agreed to use the Venezuelan digital currency. You're watching how it works, folks. Between the two is a private contract. You're just utilizing this thing, this fiat thing. It's not fiat at the point it passes. It's just the tool of passing value, accounting for value. And in this case has a way, apparently, for any, if you will call, default of value in the medium to be restored by something in the world of value. And now we have the medium of convenience here in the crypto blockchain. That's private between the parties agreeing to it. Not public to look in from the government to tax and regulate and all this other nonsense. And diminish and debase and whatever all they're going to do as a debt-based system. The extortion system. So this question was interesting. Why ask that question at all? Why is it not relevant? Why is there a dismissal of the Rothschilds? And then why isn't there a highlighting, even though they talk about it, why isn't there the highlighting of the points of what the Rothschilds are interested in when they did look at blockchain? They did not look at Ethereum, or at least on the surface, although the technology of contract, again, to me, contracts in a ledger are no big deal. I don't see how this is a big deal. Attached to a value chain, these are just parallelisms to me. I don't see what the big deal about all this is, really. It's how it gets contorted and adulterated for the use of someone else that you aren't in control of is, I guess, more my point, that the people in the know of the world, as we are understanding things about the term, utilizing the name Rothschild, watch where the successful people go as another simple plan. They are not going to the public blockchain. They're privatizing it. And it's not based in debt or something that's going to be attached by a bigger system, a bigger bully to debt. They're going to go to wealth. And let me just address something else at that point. Remember, the Fed, when it accounts for gold and silver coin, accounts not on the debt on their ledger as a debt or a negotiable instrument in the debt system. It has to put it on the ledger of the asset, the wealth. It's not in the debt system, this substance, this stuff of the land. It's why I keep talking to you about understanding the law of your land, not the Constitution, the land itself, how you get it, how you hold it, what keeps others at bay in law, not what we're seeing as the destruction of law like we see exampled by the Zionistas over a people that are native to their land. If the Indians in the United States of America weren't any example to us as well. But as Russell Means said, folks, all y'all in the United States of America, welcome to the reservation, is your truth. You are supposed to stop it, and you still, I think, have time to do that. And you certainly have the responsibility unless you are a defeated, conquered people, and then I certainly don't want to hear about your complaint anymore about it. Just stop. Why do you waste your time? Why do I see a concept statement countering the problem if you're not going to step up to stop a bit of it? I don't get it. You're a conquered people. Admit to it. Stop complaining. Stop wanting to go. Be a conquered people and go live your life in peace. But I really don't need to hear the noise about all the woe and the whining that we all have. And like I said, I get this off this broadcast. I do post-production. About midnight, I'm all done posting everywhere, whatever we're doing. I then go to a couple of hours later. I finally get to the bed. I wake up in the morning. I get back to job one, which is to focused attack on the oppressors that are working against, whether it's me or someone close to me or someone that comes to me that will take on their own project responsibility and take guidance. We have to do that if anybody one of us is going to succeed. So they ask, is Rothschild involved? Well, Rothschilds want nothing to do with the Bitcoin outwardly, anything public and anything in debt. They're going to privatize it in wealth. Is a clue to you. So I don't care whether the Rothschilds are going to be influential or not. Is a misstatement, is a misquestion, because again, Bitcoin's an infinitesimal part of what the Rothschilds actually have institutions in place to funnel. Even if they're not controlling it, they get a piece of the action, folks. Way more in a day than you could ever think about in your life. Beyond. Way more than anything Bitcoin will ever do. Well, at this point, I think Bitcoin's going to do public thing. But it won't be what the private people, the people of knowledge are using. They're going private, they're going to wealth. Then Venezuela went private, and it went to wealth, and then another nation recognized that and did a private deal between them, notwithstanding the sanctions of the biggest bully in the world. If you understand how that all worked, then why? Again, why? So let me get back. One more thing I wanted to mention. I made a statement last week, and I just wanted to see if anybody would kind of comment when I did it. I kind of have to comment out it. I said, based on this, going over to the blockchain, and that your social credit now is like a merit system. And we talked about that last week in China. I said, how many people do you know that have judgments against you that the government wants to use blockchain to diminish your social credit, to get you to impose upon you, to embarrass you and shame you into paying your debts to a judgment? And I kind of threw that out there. I wanted to see if there's any response, but I also want to get back to it today. What is actually the biggest problem in the government about judgments in court? Not the people amongst themselves. That was what I was talking about last week. I don't know of many people at all that have those kinds of judgments. But what's the government actually worried about in getting people to pay their judgments? Isn't it just the government's imposition through their so-called justice systems, their judicial systems, in extorting from you their judgments? That this social credit system tool using blockchain and other technologies, whatever they want to call all of them, face recognition, to do so, isn't it really just another enforcement tool for the government plunder? And so in that regard, we all should have said, well, I know lots of people that are beholden to the government through traffic tickets or taxes, property taxes, fees, fines, taxes, and other punishments and penalties. application costs. The government holds a lot of that servitude, doesn't it? And so I kind of did a little bit of a trick statement last week. I didn't hear nobody comment on it. Maybe some of you thought it. Maybe it was too small a thing to comment on. But I know a lot of people that owe the government money, the government, on its plunder system. That when you attach this to China, what they're doing, and then you reflect it back over to the United States and every other government in the future, utilizing this technology on your social credit, on whether or not they'll decide to pull the plug on you, let you go somewhere or not, will be on whether or not you keep current with the government exactions of every kind. I'm saying that specific to the United States. You don't think this 42 U.S.C. 1981 is going to come up and bite you on your hinder parts? You're missing the big point I've been talking to you about. This is what I also broached to you last week. You're either going to be someone that's in the prison system or the middle class sucking sound system. You're going to be being pulled. The human resource that you are is going to be pulled. You're either going to get your time into the system of privatized prisons and you'll be working for 25 cents an hour, or you're going to be the one barely making it out there in the real world under shared prosperity, and you're going to be fined and feed, and you're going to come out and pay it just so that you can go out and you can go without question go to the park just to see the trees. Your social credit system, the judgments they're talking about collecting, are to the plundering government that'll be putting more and more and more on you to pay. I don't know what to say. I'm trying to tell you, and I held something back. Wanted to see if anybody would comment on it. They're setting this up against you all. The Chinese example is exactly what they're doing. They didn't tell you what judgments they want to collect on. It's government judgments. Under the color of justice, which most all you all can complain about, but couldn't actually show more than an opinion about it, how the injustice manifests and executes itself. And I'm saying that from a little bit of experiential authority on the parts I've uncovered. I don't mean opinion. I mean understanding how the beast runs by habit and interfering with that habit to expose it and also to assert a remedy against a harm that at this point, because most of us are crickets, will take a lot longer to enforce. The government social credit system on the blockchain, whatever they call it, US of Bitcoin, is going to be this system that's going to ramp up the plunder, as they do now that people seem to believe is not a plan. Your traffic tickets are probably the most obvious thing. You don't seem to feel it so much because I think there's somehow even the cops get guilty, so they just kind of pick on everybody as in turn, and it takes a few years of time before they get to the population, dinging a couple people every day. They finally get back around to you, and about 4 or 5 years on, you get another ticket. And if you really tick somebody off, and then they'll hit you 3 or 4 right in a row, they'll cause you to submit. Well, all that money, you're either going to cough it up out of your endeavors every day, and you're coming and you're going from what you need, you're going to cough it up, or they're going to stick you on this system, and pretty soon you won't be able to travel, you won't be able to use your car, you won't be able to go on the Amtrak, you won't be able to get on the bus. You'll be confined to the walkways. And if you think that's outlandish and science fiction, you're not paying attention. They're doing it in China. They're doing it with Ethereum. They're doing it with the Bitcoin. They're doing it in the blockchain is really what the point is. And they're taking all this big data and they're funneling it to their cause to be able to better extort from you. It's what I keep repeating to you, the 42 U.S.C. 1981, your equal rights. I don't care what you think your color is, what your race is, what your class is. You are going to be the subject class. And your civil rights, right in law, 42 U.S.C. 1981, is to pay, you shall pay exactions of every kind. To include things such as fines, fees, payments, punishment, penalties. And everyone's been in la-la land about this, not watching this train coming down the tracks in these things called phones, portable phones, concentrated evil. The governments are putting a system, a cage around you like you don't even have a clue about. And you'll complain about it. Well, you'll embrace part of the technology. You'll actually embrace put the chain around your neck, thinking it's cool. Oh, it looks pretty. It's a golden chain. It looks cool. You're doing it all to yourself, not listening to someone like myself. And if you are listening, you're seeing the impending doom. Some of you will do something. Most of you will just complain about, yeah, we see it. Yep, he's right. It's right there. Yeah, those bastages. Those farging bastages, as Roman Moroni said. That movie cracked me up. Yeah, you'll say that, but we won't do a thing against the obvious. The people in money and control are doing what I said you need to do regarding the new technology, and they're keeping it completely out of the hands of public, whatever that might be. It's private, absolutely private. The governments are going completely private to absorb all of you all into this meritocracy of loyalty. And the judgments that I asked you, how many people do you know that owe judgment? Well, not many, I said. I was thinking, you to me, I don't sue you. How many people do I sue me that I owe money to, that I sue, that they owe money to me? I don't know that many people. I sure know thousands, tens of thousands, millions of people that owe the government something, or they've paid them. And this system, you don't pay them, you're going to lose your right to move about the country. Southwest Airlines is going to have to change its title, its statement. You're free to move about the country. Let me look at your social credit first. Oh, you didn't pay your property taxes quite soon enough. If they haven't already gotten your bank account and stolen it from you, and now you're sitting on the street because you couldn't pay your rent. Now, what are you doing out here, homeless one? That's against the law. And you feeding him? No, you're going too. Social credit demerit. Pay us. You don't think this is happening, you're missing the whole thing. I'm actually mind-boggled to actually watch this. And then I see the crickets, and it really does something inside to me. I don't even know what. I don't even have to I can't let it attach to me. I just step back behind it and say, wow, we're really messed up. We're really messed up. We're watching this freight train a coming, and we're standing on the track looking to see if we can read the number on the front. You are going to get permission through all this technology or not. And one of the biggest, and we see the highest level, we think authorities and constitutions and all this, and we think there's law in this world, and we think that people who take oaths of office to honor it are honoring it. And you think you're going to do something in the future, and you think your rights are so powerful, and the number one right, if we have the most important right is the right to free speech, and the second most important right is the right to own a gun. Really? That's not going to be a social credit of yours when you get into that system. And we're seeing evidence of this happening. Your social credit, you can only do so much against governments that would otherwise profess to give you, to honor these things in people, because the government's supposed to represent the people themselves. And each one of you good folk. And we get this social credit extension, and the denial is already being played out. I don't need a computer and a phone and a cryptocurrency. We're watching the mechanisms of the government agreeing to the occupation over your life everywhere. And we see it again, as I talked about a little bit about it before in this whatever you think about him or not, this thing with the Julian Assange and them locking him down so that he cannot be the journalist or publicist on information to you, is to me just an extension of what the social credit's going to be in the future. But you see it physically working out. I have to say, you, on the principle of this, you can't look away and you can't be silent. It's happening locally, so just find some place local that the same similar thing, but this is the pinnacle that we get to see. This is the highest pinnacle of the example. Ecuador will respect Assange's asylum right if... Did you already hear the conundrum? Ecuador will respect Assange's asylum right if. Can't be much of a right. If he obeys. No politics condition. In other words, his asylum right is precarious. It's on the tipping point. If he agrees to not be a journalist or a publicist. Would you think about that for just a little bit in the context of what I'm saying about your social credit and whether or not you're going to get to do something or not in law and all this other thing? And your actual rights are to pay extortions of every kind. And when you look at the word exactions, it means not just extortion, but wrongful extortion. That's your rights, folks, if you just pay attention for just a little bit. Why you're yakking and complaining about minor things beyond, everyday little things, I really don't understand either. They're walking you right into, I don't even know if 1984 is a good model. Ecuador will respect Assange's asylum right if he obeys. Is the working out of your government's, people in government violation, these occupiers inside your what you thought was lawful government. You can be crickets, you can turn the knob, you can say, oh, Assange is a jerk, whatever you want to say. Look at the principle underlying it. Not so certain on these guys that always make the news. I've already talked about it. I don't have to do. The principle is this point. A government whose Ecuador, the president of the government of Ecuador, the constitution of which says you have the right to free speech and you have the right to asylum, and you have the no authority in the government to interfere with any of that, is being violated in this guy named Lenin Moreno. I think Kim.com said it was Morano. And then I asked, is that a new breakfast cereal? Call them Moranos. Like when Venezuela seized the Kellogg's cereal factory, and Maduro did it. I said, is he now going to make new cereal? It must be the thing to do to presidents of countries. Make your own breakfast cereal. He's going to make the Maduros. So Moranos are their next breakfast cereal, apparently, because he becomes in the power to say so. The Constitution says otherwise. This guy's going to condition a journalist's rights of asylum if he speaks about politics, which, if you look underneath the right of free speech, is really one of the pinnacle reasons for the speech, is the political speech. I don't know if you all knew that. That's really almost the focus of why the right exists, so that you can speak out politically without being killed, more than likely. Oppressed, controlled, put away, caged, whatever you want to say. It was about the political statement. Why? You see how powerful it is. When a legislator is in the legislature, he is immune from what he says inside that body. Free speech of political matters. It might be law, but that's policy. Forget all those connections. You're not paying attention. The legislator is immune on whatever he says on the legislature's floor, if you will. That's the political nature of the right. From all knowledge about it. And this guy in Ecuador is going to condition that, allow a right of asylum that's held in the Constitution to be inviolate if someone obeys is your social credit of the future through your blockchain technology as being developed. Another guy that they're doing now in UK, as we heard last week was the worst, is this guy named Tommy Robinson. We came away last week with the guy being in jail, this and that. Some more stories came out about this. That's another really obscure story that's all obscured. A lot of hard to find information. I probably spent way too long trying to figure this guy out, figure out his condition, figure out what's going on than I should have. But in fact, at the time he was violated by a judge, he was in a public area doing journalism. And the judge appears to have witnessed that. In UK, that's illegal. He can't witness and sentence. He was charged for, at the point of the so-called, of the journalism in the public square, not in the court, but outside, he was charged with, excuse me, it just slipped my mind. You call it disturbance, a public disturbance. When it got into court, they couldn't get him for public disturbance because of what he was doing. The judge who witnessed what he was doing called it contempt of court on his prior consented to guilty plea on a hearing that was on a sentence that was suspended. How contorted this starts to become. That what they've done is they've attacked another journalist, utilized a hook that they had in him before, contorted what he actually did to wrongly apply a contempt, which the judge is in control over. So, what's the lesson? What I tell you, you don't do anything, or you avoid at all costs anything that gives the authority a right of decision. What I talk about all the time. But this Tommy Robinson condition is so convoluted, and it's been made so, I think it's so, and it's being used to stifle the journalist in Tommy Robinson, notwithstanding what he's done before. He's got a whole story around him. It's so much, like I said, I think I might spend too much time. I don't want to spend more time here than to tell you there's so much, they've now got it now to the point that the system is so questionable, even though it holds all the authority in the decision, that they are now again allowing the government is now in control when you do this stuff. If they can go after two journalists for speaking out on a right, they have two rights in a way. They have the right of free expression. They also have, in the United States anyway, the right of the press. Both of them are destroyed by a civil side insult to the judge, who really shouldn't even be there in the first place. In other words, it didn't actually have a crime, but they brought him into the system and converted it into an insult to the judge, based on a prior agreement that he had made, totally different than what his actions were in front of the court. And so I don't, like I said, I spent a lot of time going through this. I got some links. Hopefully it'll give you some insight. People are explaining there's some problems with this case, and you really have to look at this case and really parse it out very carefully. What you're going to find, though, is a judge who is utilizing a wrongly imposed charge to give him the authority to impose his private insult and control this journalist, is put into an AI program in the future and put into your social credit algorithm, is what I see here. Evidence. A gentleman named Bruce Boyer talks about the Tommy Robinson affair. I found it interesting. Is one of the things he'll go through, and he'll lay this out a little bit clearer. Here's why it's important to lay this out clearly. You need to be able to put what Tommy Robinson did and what he was subject to, and what he against what he did and what they blamed him for, and then the corruption the state will do. Because I want you to be able to start seeing the analysis of the migration of a problem into a place the government can justify its actions. For the most part, up until now, nobody actually challenges against properly, which is what I try to show you to do all the time. So this has become a sordid affair. My point, again, is this is the government's AI out in practice. It'll be reduced to some algorithm for your social credit in the future. And they're targeting people with two, if I can say it, two rights, free speech and freedom of the press. And if you think your little feeble understanding of I have the right to speak anywhere is anything, you're nuts, and you're not going to be lasting long. Well, you're gonna like walking a lot of places and looking for grubs in the forest if you can get into the king's forest to eat, because you're gonna be one of those examples of what we shouldn't do. Kind of how I expose the common law court nonsense stuff when there's so many other answers around, and not putting yourself in jeopardy. Stay ahead of this one. I guess. Okay, so there's I have a few links, not a lot, maybe 4 or 5, to the Tommy Robinson thing. I think this is a good review of how you're brought into the system on something that he agreed to the guilt on his prior charge. I can't argue with that, with his consent to that. But then how they adjust that, how the system takes advantage, and I think people need to see how that gets done so that you understand how it gets done, so either you avoid it in the first instance or can address it directly if it does happen to you. And as I look up, I see the charge against Robinson declared by the police at the time of the arrest was breach of peace, was changed to contempt of court. And the judge who witnesses this, who has no right to do that, is the one who made the change in order to gain the hold. And so this adulteration, this hidden thing, is what you need to understand is one of the realities in the system, and why what I see has been a defeat for a lot of people, and they didn't understand it. And so then we rail a bit, we get our so-called patriot hat on, and we start stomping around the Constitution, not realizing these are a bunch of criminals occupying your government. These are not the people honoring the government, honoring the oath, if you will. And it's not your opinion of the oath. They're not even honoring the most basic interpretation. Like a judge who's a victim witnessing a crime can't be the one who determines a sentence. I mean, come on. I don't need a whole lot of law to say that there's something wrong there. We got a conflict of interest, don't we? But see, conflict of interest in reflexive law, so-called, doesn't exist. It's whoever's in the seat of decision has the right to make a decision. Under contempt of court, that judge is all-powerful. Literally all-powerful. It takes a bunch to overthrow that. It can be done, but I mean, it takes your knowledge of that too. And it would take a group of people to help someone like Tommy out. I'm not exonerating anything that he's done before. He agreed that he did wrong. That's up to him. But how this system will take your stuff, like again, well, I'm not doing anything wrong. Well, in effect, he wasn't either. And look what happened to him. Oh, my digital world is wide open. I can tell anybody anything. Okay. Understand what's the train that's coming down upon us. I hear a train a-coming, folks. Now, are you going to be standing on the tracks when it comes through? Or are you going to just be stepping away from it? Or are you going to realize that train represents total occupation or corruption, and maybe go pull some pins out of its rail to prepare it for what it needs to be doing? Am I saying destroy the system? No, I'm saying you find the what it needs to gives it life, and you pull those pins. You find the things inside the structure that they are relying on under the color, and you show that's not valid, and you pull its authority, you expose them for the felon that they are. And then you have a whole lot of people watching because the system won't repair itself. Why? Because these occupiers are in the system and rely on the mass overthrow of it. I don't know what else to say. This is just a rule of man. Over time, forever. And our preference to want to be living in peace today, what we think it is, and what we've been bolstered up to believe in the fluffy nest they gave us, isn't going to change that fact of reality. I'm pausing. You might think, oh no, we can do so. We can change my. I'm going to dig my heels in. Yeah, go ahead. Dig your heels in. You're standing in the middle of the rails of a train coming down. Dig your heels in. Tell me how. Well, you're not going to be able to tell me how that works for you, are you? But I can predict the future, and so can you. So you're either somebody committing suicide, or you're oblivious. I mean, come on. It's not. Anyway. So, this is what I see. This is my frustration. This is what I see people. I see the argument and the discussion and the yak and all this other stuff. I don't see a better answer. I don't see a better resolve. I don't see a responsibility. And it's ours. It's been imposed upon us, and that's something we can't change, and we can't live in our fantasy world to stop it. They don't care about your fantasy world. They are a train a-coming. If you didn't realize you're standing on the tracks they built, I think you missed another clue. So what's going on in UK? We said years and years ago, what happens in UK a couple of years ago, it hits the United States. Well, then it got down to like almost 3 to 6 months. Whatever happened in the UK happened here. Well, in the United States of America. Then I see this. What other adulterations are going on? What else is going on that the legal system allows and the people just sit there and don't know what to do with? Exclusive of the Telegraph, gene-edited super crops to be grown in the UK for the first time. Of many adulteries, another one. And then we see consider the Brexit problem here too as well. Now, I think Brexit was a good idea, but it was the Queen needed it. All this other, there's other reason why it had to go that way. It would be good for her, but it's also good for the people. But they have to take control. Not go down that analysis. But now in the UK, if they do Brexit, they're going to be split from the EU anyway, so they get to have gene-edited super crops. So what technology are they using? What loophole is it talk about here in the legal system? But the fact that the fiction that says that because we don't know of any harm, this CRISPR-Cas9 system, we can make it look like we're nothing more than a natural hybrid. We're not bringing in any other foreign material. It's just the material of the same plant readjusted. Is the so-called loophole to get around so-called gene-modified organisms. Is an adulteration, a corruption that is invading now. It's going to be going to UK. They're telegraphing it for the United States. On the Telegraph here, they're not doing it, but the Telegraph is reporting this loophole where they're using I told you about this, CRISPR-Cas9, they'll use it as if it's not modifying, and now they don't. In the United States, they already say you don't have to, it's not gene modified if you do that. That's what the rule is, because why? A bunch of you didn't go down when they had that rule-making session and make a comment and expose the real fact of it all and get yourself in line to go after that problem. And so you are going to be subject to those that did. How's that for an occupation? See, I mean, was it Jefferson told us, the vigilant active masses. If we're not vigilant and active, those that are win. And it's lawful. Not legal, it's lawful. You have to understand that shifts there. Because you're no longer in it. So, if we want to continue to have the harm come upon us, and my problem isn't the GMO, it's, again, as I keep saying, the blindness, the persistent and intended blindness in not looking at, if not all, the majority of consequences of interfering with the genetics to begin with, in a intrusive way as the technology has been providing. It's not simply just rezipping, reorganizing, removing certain things. The imposition of the technology in the DNA causes the cell to respond. It's a natural thing. You want to talk about where life starts? It's in there. It's actually got defenses. We heard it last week. No tests have been made on these things. All this stuff goes on and no one really looked at the basics of how the system really works. Well, we know a lot today, but we certainly don't even have a clue somehow. It's like almost like the inner space of the ocean. We know so little. We know more about outer space than we know about inner space. Still, 40 years after I wanted to become an oceanographer. The story hasn't changed. So, Where are we going to go? Are we going to let these people tell us what life is? Or are we going to tell them that they don't have that right, and we're going to bring our meaningful, non-opinionated, but meaningful, factual reason why they shan't? That's up to us. That's the way the system has been made. So UK is going to do a so-called loophole. They think that CRISPR-Cas9, because it doesn't change, add any foreign material, that's not going to be GMO. Again, the attorneys have figured out how to get at you. Now, the attorneys wouldn't go so far as to get at you at what they call your curtilage at your house, notwithstanding the car. There's not going to be an adulteration, at least now, for a problem jumping into the United States. How, we get run down by this legal system. There's still things that work. You got to look and see does what works and how they got there, what the sentiment is that the occupier doesn't want to invoke to get you ticked off, so you go do something effective finally. Fourth Amendment victory, 8-1, Supreme Court rules police need a warrant to search vehicle on private property. Refuse to extend the automobile exception. So, and this is from whatreallyhappened.com, and I haven't seen or heard from him for a long time, but not that I get out much. But so here, the bar members of the Supreme Court, or those that were prior bar members, won't allow an invasion of your curtilage. And that's a funny word, too. But it does start to tie to the right of your land in your most private area. Again, keeping things private. They did not extend the automobile exception to the Fourth. Did you ever see an automobile exception to the Fourth Amendment? No, but this is the thing they invented, because all of a sudden the car on the public street somehow has this magical lack of impervity to privacy. When if I look at it, that's not gone when you got out in the public, because that's really your private use of a granted right that the government was supposed to help exclusive to you. And so the attorneys won't start to describe it this way, and so you lose all of that. But when it got onto your private property, and this to me is a big deal, because when you tie that into your land patent, I may even be able to push the curtilage question back to the street. Not your most private areas of expectation of privacy, but your entire border is expected that when a car, an automobile, they claim here, is on private property, the cops have to get a warrant. Is not an adulteration of what we thought was going on relative to rights and privacy regarded land property rights. Not the goods of the automobile protected, but because they're on the land. Think about that as I keep talking to you about this land disposal law. Anyway, thank you for tuning in today. I hope something I said inspires you to continue looking. Pick up a problem, a wrong you want to make right. Work it through. Understand the battlefield. Don't let anybody persuade you away against that. We need all hands on deck. If you have, there's a ship of state. We need to there. If you're not, you're in the water with the sharks. It's pretty simple. You only got two places here. Then you're going to have a mutiny. The mutiny's happened. So someone's got the tiller of that ship of state, and it's going to run us into some foreign land, or it's going to run us into that iceberg, because again, the sharks are waiting. It doesn't matter. But anyway, thank you again, Grimner, for what you do at RealLibertyMedia.com, folks. Remember to tune in Real Liberty Media next week. Otherwise, UCY here. Otherwise, you're not hearing the broadcast, and you won't be getting it on the UCY YouTube either. So you got to go to RealLibertyMedia.com's YouTube. Jules, please take care of yourself. I know you will. I know you're interested. Thank you very much for all you've done. It's been an honor to be a part of your network and what you've done to promote the broadcast. Folks at freedomnetwork.com, if you will, donate there to keep that social network. Maybe bring some fresh blood to it or something. I don't know. I don't really get involved with the social network. I'm really too busy, but that's another tool for a whole bunch of people. Thank you again for all y'all. And remember, Spreaker is where we go through. So you can go find us there. I'll be with you next week. Tech diffs are nature willing.
Well, that's another lesson. I hope with today's information you can take it to those that misbehave. From behind the woodshed, leaving his mark on the beast, this is Hal Anthony. Till next time, journey with purpose.
Well, that's what opening up a can of whoop-ass feels like.
Son, you just opened a whole case of whoop-ass.